G'day, I'm Peter FitzSimons. 200 and a bit of years ago, Great Britain got rid of huge chunks of its great unwashed by sending them to the great southern land. Those poor bastards were transported for big crimes, little crimes, even such putrid political crimes as espousing republicanism. These days, Australia itself has become a major player in casting people off into exile. I've come across the ditch to meet some of these modern-day exiles, sent from Australia, some of them in chains, some of them transported for life. All of them told by the Turnbull government, don't call Australia home. As a matter of fact, don't even call us again. Auckland is where most exiles trickle in. And for those sent back here against their will, it's strictly a backdoor arrival.
I'm nervous. I'm a little bit scared about starting a new life here after 20 years.
Shawn Wynyard's one of more than 1,300 Kiwis deported in the last 3 years since Australia's laws changed. He's certainly no innocent. Shawn hit his partner badly enough to put her in hospital and him in prison with a 12-month sentence. Now he's free. But this moment, after 8 months in jail and detention centres in Australia, is one he's been dreading.
I mean, I haven't got words for it. I'm just worried, mate. I'm scared. You know, this is like a new world to me, man. I haven't seen my kids or family for 8 months, and they've basically just sent me home.
Shawn left New Zealand with his parents as a 24-year-old. His family is in Queensland. He's back here at 44, broke, alone, and trying to recognise a city he left 2 decades ago.
Well, I decided to go for a walk down Queen Street just to see what it was like, and I got asked 4 times for change by homeless people, and they were just camped out on the footpath as people were just walking by them. It's crazy. It was never like that 20 years ago when I left.
Shawn relies on a helping hand from Australia's Home Affairs and New Zealand Social Services to pay for temporary accommodation, and he's given $250 in cash. But he's shocked when the motel wants $150 as a deposit.
150, you reckon?
Yes, we'll be fine.
So I get that back when I leave?
Yeah. When you're checking out, sir.
Then he's on his own. If he'd taken out Australian citizenship, he wouldn't be in this fix. Under the new laws, any non-citizen sentenced to a year or more in jail or judged to be of bad character can be deported. If Shawn was an Australian living in New Zealand, he'd be treated very differently, allowed to stay after doing his time.
You know, I've been working pretty much the whole time I've been there. I thought I'd be right, but then once I actually went to jail, I got my papers to say that I was getting deported.
Instead of being released from jail, he was sent to a Perth detention centre. He wasn't the only Kiwi there. There were scores of others. In fact, New Zealanders now make up the largest nationality group locked up in Australia's immigration detention centres.
I've only got 5 days here in this motel, and after that I've got to find someplace, or I get a little bit of help to find it, but still, it's pretty hectic, you know, it's pretty crazy when you've only got a short amount of time, everything's going on in your head, you know, you're trying to adjust to a new country that you haven't been to for so long, and just thinking about everything, you know, your family.
So you married an Australian woman, you've got the father of Australian kids, your parents are living in Australia, your sister's living in Australia, everybody's Australian except you, because Australia said you can get the hell out.
Yep.
That's tough.
It's harsh, it is very harsh. Yeah, it is. It is really. It's the real deal, man.
I mean, there'll be people that watch this and say, hang on, he's bashed his missus, he's on ice, we don't want this bloke in our country.
Yeah. Well, that's what they're saying. We were high on drugs and we were fighting regularly, all the time, you know, and it came to a heated point where we got into a scuffle and I backhanded her, you know, and I wish I hadn't have. Worst thing I've done in my bloody life, mate, you know.
Bad enough backhand that she had to go to hospital.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So while you were living in Australia, you could have taken out citizenship papers. You married an Australian woman. You're the father of Australian children. You got the credentials to be an Australian.
Yeah.
Do you feel Australian or Kiwi?
I feel Australian, yeah, because I've spent most of my adult life there, you know. So I had a business there.
What was the business?
Takeaway shop, cafe.
Making good money?
Yeah, good money, yep. Yeah, these are my kids.
Shawn's appealing his deportation. He's reconciled with his partner and hopes she'll bring their children, aged 10 and 14, to visit.
Tell you what, looking at those kids and looking at you, we've got to reckon their mother must be a very beautiful woman.
She is. Yeah, they're not bad, eh? And I miss them heaps, mate, you know.
Since 2014, more than 3,000 non-citizens have been expelled from Australia, and Kiwis are the biggest group. More than 1,000 Kiwis who got into trouble, even minor trouble, have been sent back here, and that number may grow by as much as 15 times over the next 10 years. Not surprisingly, our Kiwi brothers and sisters in arms are up in arms.
We don't think we as a country are being treated fairly.
We've had individuals who have been deported to New Zealand who have never ever stepped foot in New Zealand, ever.
It's demonstrably unfair. It's not the Australian way of doing things.
Maori culture runs deep throughout New Zealand, but nowhere deeper than right here, the easternmost part of the country, Gisborne. I've come here to meet a long-time Australian resident recently sent packing, not because he was charged with any Australian crime, simply because he was judged to be a bad character. So they sent him back to the land where he came from, the land of the whale rider. When you're a little boy, when you're a teenager, when you're a young man, this is where you grew up and grew to manhood.
Yeah, me and all my first cousins always were brought here.
Kohaku is home. After 6 years in Australia that ended disastrously, he's reconnecting with his culture.
This is the wharenui, whitireo.
Can we go inside?
Yep.
Wowee. It's extraordinary, beautiful. So I've had the honour of facing the All Blacks haka 6 times. When you were a little boy, were you taught that haka?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so how does it go, roughly?
Kamate, kamate, kaura, kaura. Kamate, kamate, kaura, kaura. Tēnei te tangata, huru, huru, nāna, i tiki mai whakawhiti tērā. Hupane, hupane. Hupane, kopane, whiti tērā. Hey.
Used to scare the bejesus out of me. The warrior in Kohaku came to the fore in 2010 when he was a young lance corporal fighting for the New Zealand Army in Afghanistan against the Taliban. Now, Kohaku's fighting another, much more personal war against Australia's Home Affairs Department. It's a battle he's losing. After the army, he went to Perth. He worked as a scaffolder and joined the Rebels motorcycle gang with fellow workers, many of them Kiwis. He got engaged to an Australian woman, Teresa, and became stepfather to her daughter.
So you set up well in Perth, you're earning a good dollar, you've got a fine family to go home to. Why did you join the Rebels?
That camaraderie, I guess, from coming from the military. I felt personally that I was on my own, and they welcomed me with open arms as a family.
And a lot of people will say, what? He's a member of the Rebels, get him out of here. Good riddance, we don't need him in Australia. Do you regret joining the Rebels?
Never, not one day.
Under the changes to the Migration Act, just being a member of a bikie gang, an organisation suspected of criminal behaviour, was enough to get Kohaku deported on bad character grounds, even though it's not illegal in WA to belong to one.
So you're in prison for 5 months, in a poxy cell, never put on a charge and never told what the crimes you committed were?
Yeah, I wasn't there on criminal charges, I was there on immigration, which are two different things, but was still treated as a prisoner who has committed a crime.
And the charge was that you're a man of bad character?
Yep.
You've got tattooed just on your neck here, FTP. What does that mean?
Fuck the police.
That's a bit strong.
It is. It was a statement put on my neck so they could see it every day. I don't like them in uniform, and they didn't like me in my uniform.
Do you accept that there are innocent people in motorcycle gangs who just like motorbikes?
I look at the facts in relation to these individuals, the intelligence that's available, the information that's available to me to make a decision, and we make a decision based on that information.
In the case of Kohaku, former New Zealand soldier living in Perth, he was held with no charge, no crime committed.
Peter, he was a member of the Rebels outlaw motorcycle gang. We know a lot about that gang, and we know that they are part of a syndicate which is the biggest distributor of drugs in our country. In fact, this passed through the Parliament with bipartisan support. If you're a member of that gang, you face deportation.
In essence, though, is it not that justice must not only be done but be seen to be done?
Yes.
You imply a raft of strong accusations against the fellow that we can't see.
Well, Peter, that happens every day. I mean, there's intelligence that's gathered that's not released for a variety of reasons.
If you're a gangster, if you're a bikie gang member, if you've engaged in physical assault or murder...
We don't want you here. The broader community doesn't want you here.
So here's the thing. That throng of Kiwis who've been banished from that Garden of Eden that we know as Australia may not be angels, and it's way too easy to say good riddance to bad rubbish and we don't care about what happens to those Kiwis. But make no mistake, this may boomerang on the rest of us too. I've come to the New Zealand Parliament, the famed beehive, to seek the views of the Justice Minister, Andrew Little.
When you have a man imprisoned for 5 months with no charge, is that a classic example of a suspension of habeas corpus, and is it dangerous?
Detention for that length of time without charge. I can't think of another country where a liberal democratic country like New Zealand, like Australia, like many other Western countries in the world where that would be tolerated.
Australia and New Zealand, we're brothers and sisters in arms for a long time. Is this going to affect our friendship?
I think a lot of Kiwis look at what Australia is doing with Kiwis, many of whom have lived there since infancy and who, for whatever the circumstances they've later got themselves into, are now being sent back and are saying, this doesn't look like our best friend, our nearest neighbour, and the spirit with which we've grown up with each other. People who identify as Australian residents, because that's where they've done their living, and saying they're your problem now, I think that is improper, and I think it is a breach of human rights.
Your policy is a breach of human rights. It's quite an indictment from New Zealand Justice.
Well, we just need to see the evidence instead of the emotions. They're New Zealand citizens. They're not Australian citizens, and it's no breach of human rights. In fact, it's a breach of civil rights of Australians who fall victims to these criminals, and Australia won't tolerate it. It doesn't matter who we're talking about. The criteria for us is whether or not you've committed an offence against Australian citizens, and that's the test that we apply.
Auckland's construction boom and labour shortage have been a boon for deportees, nicknamed 501s and 116s after the new laws. In the 2 years since the Australian government forced Anthony Miller to return here, he's gone from down and out to up and away. He owns his own scaffolding business and employs dozens of 501s.
Okay, welcome to the scaffold game.
Nice to be here. I've done it before. When I was a young man, I did it. Anthony left New Zealand for Queensland with his parents when he was just 15. 17 years on, he was deported here after a history of criminal offences and time served for drug trafficking. He can never legally set foot in Australia again.
Sort of found myself in trouble when I was 25. I just got caught up in a little bit of a drug scene, yeah. Just a bit of eckies and stuff, yeah, with the boys, and then it just turned into something. Yeah, just got sort of caught up with undercover police officers sort of thing, so yeah.
And what happened then?
I got sent to prison.
For how long?
I got sentenced to 8 years and had to serve 3.
So, 8 years, we're talking, that must have been a serious amount of drugs.
Nah.
Half a shipload, half a glove box, half a what?
I was caught with, there was 1,000 ecstasy tablets there.
Right.
That would be why, yeah.
When Anthony was arrested, he claims he was working in the mines and paying $300 a week in tax. So at that point, your parents are living in Australia, your brother's living in Australia, your life is in Australia, living with an Australian woman in an Australian house with an Australian dog.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So then you go to the big house, and the day before you come out, 3 years on good probation, what do they say to you?
Your visa's been cancelled. I didn't even know I had a visa. And you're going to sit in detention until you work out what you want to do. If you want to go back and fight it from New Zealand, or you can fight it from the detention centre. 7 months in detention was his tipping point. Mate, there's people setting themselves on fire. There's a guy tied a noose around his neck and he was up on the roof. People sewing their lips shut. It was pretty terrible. These are like the, not so much the Kiwis, like the Iranian fellas and stuff like that. I went there and just said, mate, I'll get out of here, eh? So look at you. In Australia, you're in prison. You're a drug dealer, you're scum, you're in the detention centre, we hate you, and we send you back in handcuffs, and here, you're in the sunshine, you're employing 15 blokes, you're making a fortune. Maybe the Australian law's done you good. Yeah, it's actually done pretty well, yeah, not too bad, but I wouldn't mind being back in Australia as well, but this is home now, so. So I'm driving now to the far north of New Zealand to talk turkey with a man who's got the reputation for talking straight, Foreign Minister Winston Peters. Foreign Minister, thank you very much for making time for us. Every Anzac Day we embrace each other and say we're brothers and sisters in arms, you're our closest friends across the ditch. Do you feel let down by the famous mate Australia?
No, but what I'm trying to do and try to get to Australians in the form of a message is that there has never been a time since 1945 that our two countries haven't needed each other more, and I really mean it. We've got the security of all the Pacific to look at, and we are senior nations with a chance to shape the Pacific and its security and its wealth. We better be mindful of our relationships between ourselves.
So you're underwhelmed by the move?
And the reality is, we want New Zealanders to get the same treatment an Aussie would get if they were being charged with an offence. That is a trial before you're booted offshore. And more importantly, not being told that you can appeal from offshore back to Australia. Who can afford that? Look at the legal costs and everything that's involved. We just want a bit more fairness, and we want the Aussies to behave the way we think Aussies ordinarily do behave.
Australia and New Zealand, brothers and sisters in arms for a century. We've allowed each other to live in each other's countries without the need to
get citizenship. Can you understand why New Zealand feels betrayed by this policy?
Well, I think New Zealand understands the sovereign right of Australia to say that if somebody commits an offence against our citizens, regardless of who it is, that we'll deport that person. Every nation in the world exerts their sovereign right to deport criminals back to their country of origin. New Zealand would do it with an Iraqi or a Brit who committed an offence in New Zealand in the same way that they would with an Australian citizen. They would deport that person if that person had been in contravention or in breach of the New Zealand law.
Now, as a one-time wallaby who was actually once sent off against the All Blacks for violence, I perhaps know more than most just how intense the rivalry between our two nations can be. But I also appreciate how, traditionally, when the chips are down, we stick together. So I'm wondering just how much the legislation brought in by Big Brother has affected Little Brother across the ditch. Do they still love us, or are they bitterly disappointed in their one-time mates? I put the question at a classic grudge match. Auckland Warriors trying to reverse their fortunes against our own West Tigers. So you think Australia's doing the wrong thing?
A bit of both, actually, to be honest. Yes, I agree with some things that why they're sending those people back, and then other terms, not really. I mean, if they grew up there, they should be staying there, not back here.
That's a disgrace because it's not in the Anzac spirit.
They come over with, I guess, behaviours they've learned from Australia, be it drugs or gangs or whatever. What are they going to do when they come over here? Fall into that default setting, which is gangs, drugs, violence.
Depending on what they've done and what the crime is and why they're sending them. But if they've done the time over there, don't need to deport them.
I'm catching up again with deported scaffolder Anthony Miller.
So how long have you been out of jail now?
2 years, on the 19th, 2 years.
So if you're making a good coin every week, you're doing well. Are you saving it or are you blowing it up your nose?
No, I save it all, mate. I put it all towards, I've got a couple of businesses, you know, I'm trying to grow.
You mix with a lot of deportees. Do you think that the New Zealand police are going to have their hands full in a year or two?
They've got their hands full already. Right. 80% of my mates that come back are they're in jail already.
Really?
Yep.
What, because they're druggies, because they're violent, because they're crims,
they're
what?
Come back here, they don't have anything. Like their families over there, and they just don't have anything here. They've got no support networks, you know. Like in Australia, you know, you get out of jail and you go to your auntie's cousin's house. Over here, they can send you back to a country they know. So they're just like, fuck this. I want to go fucking run them up, you know.
What a pass! What a pass for Zadua! Back to Johnson! What about the Warriors?
For the record, after a thumping performance, the Kiwis took the Aussies down this night, 26-4. And what does the deportation scoreboard look like between our two countries? Well, it's a remarkably uneven contest. In the last 3 years, Australia's deported more than 1,300 Kiwis back here. New Zealand's deported 9 Aussies. Yep, you heard right, 9.
Is there any move within your government to say to Australia, well, if you do that to our Kiwis over there, we will do that to your Australians here, or there are no Australians that
No, we've made it very clear we're not going to behave like that. Just because another country may behave in a way which we don't accept, there's no reason for us to accept what we think is, in a legal sense, unacceptable behaviour.
Is that because the Australians over here are impeccably behaved?
Take a wild guess. That'd be totally out of character for the Aussies to be impeccably behaved. But the fact is, if we think it's wrong, we don't want to compound the wrong by duplicating that law in our country.
I heard there was a secret chord that they were playing and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you?
Shawn Wynyard's full of regrets and wondering how he'll cope. He used to be one of more than 500,000 Kiwis who call Australia home. But like 2/3 of them, he didn't become a citizen and has few rights. It's a big call for him to start afresh, especially when he's on one side of the Tasman and his family is on the other.
I think that I should be allowed back on to Australian land because I've been there for 20 years. My whole family are there. I've got 2 young kids there. I've pretty much worked the whole time I've been there. I'm a decent human being and I think I deserve a chance.
Well, maybe there's a God above, and all I've ever learned from love is how to shoot somebody who I truly love.
Kohaku's getting his life back on track. He works up to 84 hours a week, managing wharf workers, loading timber bound for Asia. But his relationship with Teresa has not withstood his deportation, and he grieves the separation from his stepdaughter.
What are the realistic chances that you will ever fly back to Australia and resume your life back there?
Probably zero. I've been trying through different avenues to get this appeal.
It's back in Whangarei that he finds support from his extended family.
You've known Ko since he was in nappies?
Since he was born.
Yeah?
And he was born.
What do you think of Australia holding its nose, saying, you, Ko, get the hell out of our country?
Disgusted. Disgusted with their treatment of him. Don't understand why he was treated so badly. He didn't deserve that.
Do you think that he must have done something terribly, terribly wrong?
No. I can't understand where he could have. He may have been mischief, he may have gone off the track while he was over there, but I can't see it.
Senior Constable Richard Reeves is a childhood friend.
And I'm judging by your blue uniform, you turned into the good boy. Did he turn into the bad boy or not?
Not in my opinion, yeah, not from what I know, no. No, I go up and give him a hoogie and shake his hand and ask him how things are, because I haven't seen him for a few years.
You're not troubled by his FTP, fuck the police, under his chin?
No, to me, that's obviously history he's got with whoever he's dealt with. I work on a sort of a thing, like, people might look at the uniform and they just see the police, but there's actually a person behind that. So if that FTP is aimed at me, yeah, I might take offence, but I don't think it is talking to him.
You've hardly been sent to purgatory, though. I mean, this is an extraordinary community.
Yeah, real tight-knit here. Everyone knows each other and pretty much walk into each other's house and just go straight to the fridge.
So you've been welcomed back?
Yeah, I've never been shunned from this community.
Like all the deportees, Kohaku's life didn't turn out the way he planned. Now he has no option but to make the most of what he has.
I'm just concentrating on what I need to be doing today instead of worrying about tomorrow and what's coming. Once we're out there, we're just free of everything. No one can contact me unless you swim out there and start surfing with us. Well, home's home. Can't deport me from here.